Picture this. Christmas Eve, your parents' house, the smell of turkey and pine filling the air. Your 12-year-old son is in the hallway, carefully arranging the handmade gifts he spent weeks creating for his grandparents, aunt, uncle, and cousins. He's humming Christmas carols, completely unaware that the family he adores just spent the last 10 minutes deciding he doesn't belong at their dinner table. They look at you with those practiced smiles and say the words that will change everything. There's just no room for him this year. But what they don't know is that while they've been treating you like the family failure for 3 years, you've been quietly building something that will make them realize they picked the wrong person to underestimate. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jessica Martinez, and I never imagined that the worst betrayal of my life would happen on Christmas Eve in my childhood home. I'm 34 years old, a single mother to the most incredible 12-year-old boy you could ever meet, and up until 3 hours ago, I thought I understood what family meant. I was wrong. Let me take you back to the beginning of this particular nightmare, because the details matter. It was December 24th, 2024, and I was standing in the kitchen of my parents' 2-story colonial house in Maple Ridge, Ohio. The same house where I'd grown up believing that love was unconditional and family meant forever. The granite countertops gleamed under the pendant lights, reflecting the carefully arranged holiday decorations that my mother, Linda Thompson Williams, had spent weeks perfecting. Everything had to be just right for Linda. The red and gold garland draped exactly 12 inches apart along the cabinets, the crystal stemware polished to perfection, the linen napkins pressed with military precision. I was helping her with the final dinner preparations, trying to ignore the familiar knot in my stomach that always formed during family gatherings. You know that feeling when you're walking on eggshells but pretending everything is normal? That was my default state whenever I entered this house. My mother moved around the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who had hosted dozens of dinner parties, her silver hair styled in the same elegant bob she'd worn for the past decade, her burgundy cashmere sweater probably costing more than I made in a month waiting tables at Murphy's Diner downtown. "Jessica, dear, could you check on Tyler?" she asked without looking up from the turkey she was basting. "Make sure he's not tracking snow through the house." I walked toward the front hallway, where I could hear my son talking animatedly to someone. Tyler had this gift for finding joy in everything, and Christmas was his absolute favorite time of year. For weeks, he'd been talking about spending Christmas Eve with Grandma and Grandpa Thompson, Aunt Amanda, Uncle Mark, and his twin cousins Emma and Sophie. He'd spent his allowance money on craft supplies, staying up late after I got home from my evening shifts to work on handmade gifts for everyone. As I rounded the corner, I saw him sitting cross-legged on the hardwood floor of the entryway, carefully arranging wrapped packages under the small tree my parents kept in the front hall. This wasn't their main Christmas tree, of course. That 8-foot Fraser fir stood in the formal living room, decorated with ornaments collected over 30 years of marriage, each one placed with intention and meaning. The tree in the hallway was what my mother called the practical tree, where everyday gifts and children's presents belonged. Tyler looked up at me with those bright brown eyes that reminded me so much of his father, David, before David decided that responsibility wasn't for him and disappeared when Tyler was 9. My son's dark hair was still damp from the snow that had been falling steadily since we arrived, and he wore the red sweater I'd bought him for tonight, the one that had taken 3 weeks of overtime shifts to afford. "Mom, look," he said, his voice filled with pride. "I organized them by person. These are for Grandma and Grandpa, these are for Aunt Amanda and Uncle Mark, and these little ones are for Emma and Sophie." I knelt down beside him, marveling at the care he'd taken. Each gift was wrapped in brown paper bags that he'd decorated with markers and stickers, creating unique designs for each family member. The wooden ornaments he'd carved in his after-school program were wrapped with ribbons he'd braided himself. The painted rocks for his cousins featured their favorite colors and animals. And the friendship bracelet for Amanda, my older sister, had taken him 3 attempts to get right because he wanted the pattern to be perfect. "They're beautiful, sweetheart," I told him, meaning every word. "Everyone's going to love them." "Do you think Grandpa will really hang the ornament? I made him on the big tree?" Tyler asked, hope shining in his eyes. I felt my heart clench. Tyler had spent hours carving a small wooden star, painting it gold, and carefully writing, "World's Best Grandpa" in his best handwriting. He'd mentioned it to me at least 5 times in the past week, wondering if it would be special enough for the formal living room tree where all the important ornaments lived. "I think it's perfect," I said, though I suspected my father, Robert Thompson, would find some polite reason to keep it on the hallway tree with the other children's crafts. The sound of car doors slamming outside announced the arrival of Amanda and her family. Tyler scrambled to his feet, his excitement palpable. "They're here! Mom, they're here!" Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see Amanda and Mark getting out of their black BMW SUV, followed by Emma and Sophie, both 9 years old, and dressed in matching red velvet dresses that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Amanda spotted us through the glass and waved, her perfectly manicured hand catching the light from the porch fixture. My sister Amanda had always been everything I wasn't. 2 years older, 5 inches taller, blonde where I was brunette, confident where I was cautious. She'd married Mark Richardson straight out of college, a successful accountant who came from the kind of family that summered on Lake Erie and wintered in Florida. Together, they'd built the life that my parents had always envisioned for both their daughters. The suburban house with the circular driveway, the country club membership, the private school education for their twins. The annual family vacation to somewhere exotic enough to generate envy-inducing social media posts. I, on the other hand, had gotten pregnant at 22, with a man who turned out to be more interested in freedom than fatherhood. I dropped out of college in my senior year, moved back home briefly, then found my own apartment above Rossetti's Pizza when Tyler was 6 months old, and my parents' helpful suggestions about my life choices became too much to bear. For the past 12 years, I'd been working at Murphy's Diner, taking on extra shifts whenever possible, doing my best to provide for Tyler while watching my family treat us like the charity cases they needed to tolerate at family gatherings. Amanda breezed through the front door in a cloud of expensive perfume and cold air, her arms full of perfectly wrapped gifts in coordinating paper and ribbon. "Merry Christmas," she called out, her voice carrying that practiced cheer she'd perfected for social gatherings. "Aunt Amanda!" Tyler rushed to hug her, his genuine excitement impossible to miss. She hugged him back, but I noticed how quickly she released him, how her eyes immediately went to check if his damp clothes had left any marks on her cream-colored wool coat. "Hi, Tyler. My goodness, you've grown since Thanksgiving." Mark followed behind her, carrying more gifts and wearing the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to worry about money. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the December wind, and his cashmere scarf was draped with the careless elegance of someone who owned several identical ones. "Uncle Mark! Uncle Mark!" Tyler bounced on his toes. "Want to see the presents I made? I made them myself." Mark glanced down at Tyler's brown paper packages, with their crayon decorations and handmade ribbons. "That's very creative, buddy," he said, though his tone suggested he found Tyler's enthusiasm more exhausting than endearing. Emma and Sophie, the twins, entered last, both of them moving with the careful precision of children who'd been coached on proper behavior for family gatherings. They were beautiful girls, with their mother's blonde hair and their father's blue eyes, but there was something almost rehearsed about the way they interacted with Tyler. "Hi, Tyler," Emma said politely. "Hi," Sophie echoed. Tyler's face lit up. "Hi, Emma. Hi, Sophie. I made you guys something really cool. Want to see?" The twins exchanged a glance that seemed far too sophisticated for 9-year-olds. "Maybe later," Emma said. "We need to help Mom with the grown-up presents first." I watched Tyler's smile falter slightly, but he recovered quickly. That was my son, always trying to see the best in people, always assuming that next time would be different, that next time he'd find the right way to connect with the cousins he admired so much. My father appeared from his study, where he'd probably been watching the financial news even on Christmas Eve. Robert Thompson was a vice president at First National Bank of Ohio, a position he'd worked toward his entire career and finally achieved 3 years ago. At 62, he carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room, his silver hair always perfectly combed, his clothes always pressed, His opinions always delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong about anything important. "Amanda, Mark," he said, his voice warm in a way it rarely was when he greeted Tyler and me. "Right on time. How was the drive?" "Fine, Dad. Thank you," Amanda replied, slipping out of her coat and revealing a red cashmere sweater that probably cost more than I made in 2 weeks. "The roads are getting bad, though. We might need to leave a bit early tonight." "Of course," my mother said, appearing from the kitchen with her hostess smile firmly in place. "We'll make sure to serve dinner promptly at 6. I noticed how naturally the conversation flowed around Tyler and me, how we seemed to become invisible once the successful side of the family arrived. Tyler, bless his heart, was still trying to insert himself into the adult conversation, tugging on Mark's sleeve to show him the ornament he'd made for his grandfather. "That's nice, Tyler," Mark said absently, barely glancing down. "Why don't you go play with Emma and Sophie?" But Emma and Sophie had already disappeared upstairs to what used to be Amanda's childhood bedroom, leaving Tyler standing in the hallway with his handmade gifts, looking confused about why his cousins didn't seem interested in spending time with him. "Come on, sweetheart," I said, taking his hand. "Let's go help Grandma in the kitchen." As we walked toward the back of the house, I caught a fragment of conversation between my parents and Amanda. "Much better this year," Amanda was saying. "The girls are old enough now to really appreciate the family traditions. Important to maintain certain standards," my father replied. "Especially during the holidays." I felt that familiar prickle of unease, the sense that conversations stopped when Tyler and I entered rooms, that decisions were being made about us without our input. But I pushed the feeling aside. It was Christmas Eve. Whatever family politics were simmering beneath the surface could wait until after the holidays. How wrong I was. The next hour passed in the familiar rhythm of family gatherings. Tyler helped me set the table in the formal dining room, carefully placing the good china and crystal that only came out for special occasions. He took such pride in getting everything perfect, counting the forks to make sure each place setting was identical, adjusting the napkins so they lay at exactly the right angle. I watched him work and felt a surge of fierce protective love. This was my son, the child who had never met a stranger, who gave the biggest hugs and the most sincere compliments, who saved half his Halloween candy to share with me because he wanted to make sure I got some too. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He deserved to be surrounded by family who treasured him, who saw his generous heart and kind spirit, who made him feel valued and loved. Instead, he got polite tolerance and carefully measured affection, doled out like a limited resource that might run out if given too freely. The twins came downstairs wearing different outfits now, having changed into even more formal dresses for dinner. They sat in the living room with the adults, answering questions about school and their piano lessons and their ballet classes, performing the role of perfect grandchildren with practiced ease. Tyler tried to join their conversation several times, but somehow the topics always shifted to things he couldn't contribute to. Private school experiences he'd never had, vacation destinations he'd never visited, activities that required the kind of financial investment that was impossible on a diner waitress's salary. "Tyler's doing really well in school too," I interjected during a lull in the conversation. "He made honor roll again this semester, and his teacher says he's one of the most creative writers she's ever had." "That's nice," my mother said, but her attention was already shifting back to Amanda, who was telling a story about Sophie's solo in the school's winter concert. I saw Tyler's shoulders slump slightly, and I wanted to scream. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of, exactly why I'd hesitated to accept my parents' invitation for Christmas Eve dinner. But Tyler had been so excited, so hopeful that this time would be different, that I couldn't bring myself to disappoint him. At 5:30, my mother announced that dinner would be served in 30 minutes. Everyone began moving toward the dining room, and that's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were only 7 chairs around the table. I counted again, thinking I must have made a mistake. My parents at the head and foot, Amanda and Mark on one side, Emma and Sophie on the other side, and one chair that was clearly meant for me. "Mom," I said quietly, catching Linda in the kitchen doorway. "There's a problem with the seating. You're missing a chair." She turned to face me, and for just a moment, her perfect hostess mask slipped. I saw something in her eyes that looked almost like guilt, quickly covered by that bright, artificial smile I'd learned to dread. "Oh, Jessica," she said, her voice taking on the tone she used when she was about to deliver bad news disguised as good intentions. "We need to talk about that before Tyler comes in." And that's when I knew. Before she said another word. Before my father appeared with his newspaper folded under his arm like a shield. Before Amanda emerged from the powder room with her lipstick freshly applied. I knew that my worst fears about this family were about to be confirmed. But what they didn't know, what none of them could possibly suspect, was that I'd been preparing for this moment for 3 years. While they'd been writing me off as the family disappointment, I'd been documenting their true character. While they'd been treating Tyler like an inconvenience to be managed, I'd been building evidence of exactly who they really were. Tonight was going to be the night that everything changed. Not because I was finally going to stand up to them, though I was. Not because I was finally going to call them out on their hypocrisy, though I would. Tonight was going to change everything, because I was finally going to show them that underestimating me had been the biggest mistake of their lives. The woman they thought was weak was about to prove she was anything but. The single mother they pitied was about to demonstrate that she'd been playing a completely different game than they realized. And the son they thought wasn't good enough for their table was about to learn that he had never been the problem. They were. My mother guided me into the kitchen, away from where Tyler was still arranging his gifts in the hallway. The fluorescent lights above the island cast harsh shadows across her face, making her look older than her 58 years. She busied herself with unnecessary tasks, wiping down counters that were already spotless, adjusting serving spoons that were already perfectly positioned. "Jessica," she began, her voice carefully modulated to sound reasonable, "your father and I have been discussing the holidays, and we think it might be best if we kept things smaller this year." I leaned against the granite counter, crossing my arms. Smaller how? She still wouldn't meet my eyes, focusing instead on folding and refolding the same kitchen towel. "Well, with Amanda's girls getting older and with all their activities and schedules, we thought it would be nice to have a more intimate adult dinner." "You understand?" "No, Mom, I don't understand. Tyler is your grandson." Finally, she looked at me directly, and I saw something in her expression that I'd been pretending wasn't there for years. It wasn't malice exactly. It was worse than that. It was embarrassment. She was embarrassed by Tyler and me, by our secondhand clothes, and our small apartment above the pizza shop. By the way, we didn't fit into the picture-perfect family narrative she'd spent decades crafting. "Of course Tyler is our grandson," she said quickly, "and we love him dearly. But Jessica, you have to understand our position. Amanda and Mark have worked so hard to provide certain opportunities for Emma and Sophie. Private schools, music lessons, cultural experiences. They're at such an impressionable age. And you think Tyler is going to corrupt them somehow? Don't be dramatic." My father's voice came from behind me as he entered the kitchen. Robert Thompson had perfected the art of the reasonable tone. The voice that suggested any disagreement with him was simply evidence of the other person's inability to think logically. This isn't about Tyler personally, it's about what's appropriate for the family dynamic. I turned to face him. The family dynamic. Yes. Amanda and Mark have created a certain environment for their children. Structure, expectations, standards. Tyler is, well, he's had a different kind of upbringing. Different. That was their polite way of saying poor. Their euphemism for the life I'd built for my son through sheer determination and love. Working double shifts to afford his school supplies. Staying up late to help him with homework after coming home exhausted from the diner. Celebrating his achievements with homemade cakes instead of expensive parties. "Tyler has had a loving upbringing," I said quietly. "Of course he has," my mother interjected. "But you have to admit, Jessica, there have been incidents." The incidents. They were referring to Thanksgiving 2 years ago, when 8-year-old Emma had loudly announced that Tyler's sneakers were poor people's shoes, and Sophie had asked why he always smelled like, quote, 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 cooking grease. Tyler had tried to explain that I worked at a restaurant, that the smell wasn't because we were dirty but because I cooked food for people, but the twins had giggled and run away. When Tyler started crying, Amanda had sighed and said, This is exactly what I was worried about. The incident from last Christmas, when Tyler had accidentally broken one of my mother's crystal ornaments while trying to reach a cookie on the top shelf. He'd apologized through tears, offering to pay for it with his allowance money, but my father had spent the rest of the evening making pointed comments about teaching children to respect other people's property. The incident from Emma and Sophie's birthday party 6 months ago, when Tyler had arrived with a handmade card and a small toy he'd bought with his own money, only to watch his cousins open gifts that cost more than I made in a week. When Tyler had asked quietly why his gift looked so different from everyone else's, Amanda had said, "It's not about the money, Tyler. It's about the thought that goes into choosing something special." But the thought was exactly what Tyler had put into every gift. Hours of thought, careful consideration of what each person might like, precious time spent creating something unique and personal. The problem wasn't his lack of thought. The problem was his lack of money to express those thoughts in ways that impressed people who measured love by its price tag. "Tyler is a good kid," I said, my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. "He's kind, he's intelligent, he's creative, and he loves this family more than any of you deserve." "No one is questioning Tyler's character," my father said in that patronizing tone that made my teeth clench. "But we have to think about what's best for everyone involved. Amanda and Mark are trying to teach the girls about excellence, about striving for the best in life. Having Tyler here, with his circumstances, sends mixed messages. Mixed messages. As if Tyler's presence would somehow contaminate his cousins with the terrible knowledge that not everyone in the world lived in a 4-bedroom house with a 3-car garage." "What exactly are you saying, Dad?" He adjusted his glasses, a gesture I recognized from childhood arguments. "We're saying that perhaps it would be better if you and Tyler celebrated Christmas elsewhere this year. Somewhere more suitable to your lifestyle." My mother jumped in quickly, as if she could soften the blow. "There's a lovely community dinner at St. Mary's downtown. I hear they do wonderful things for families in transition. Very festive, very welcoming. Families in transition. Their code word for poor families, struggling families, families that didn't meet their standards of respectability. They wanted to ship Tyler and me off to a charity dinner so they could enjoy their crystal and china without the awkward reminder that not everyone at their table could afford such luxuries. Tyler has been looking forward to Christmas here for weeks," I said. "He's made gifts for everyone. He's been talking about it at school, telling his friends about how excited he is to spend Christmas with his grandparents and cousins." Amanda appeared in the kitchen doorway, having clearly been eavesdropping. She'd changed into a different sweater, this one a deeper red that complemented her blonde hair perfectly. "Jessica, no one wants to hurt Tyler's feelings. But we have to think about what's realistic here." "Realistic?" She moved to stand beside our parents, creating a united front that excluded me completely. "You're a single mother working at a diner. Tyler goes to public school, he lives above a pizza shop, he doesn't have the same advantages as Emma and Sophie. It's not fair to anyone to pretend otherwise. I'm not pretending anything. I'm trying to have Christmas dinner with my family." "But that's just it," Amanda continued, her voice taking on the patient tone she probably used with difficult clients at the marketing firm where she worked. "Tyler doesn't really fit in with our family dynamic anymore. The girls are at a different stage of development, they have different interests, different expectations. Different expectations." As if expecting basic kindness and inclusion from his relatives was somehow unreasonable for a 12-year-old boy. "Tyler has made honor roll every semester for the past 2 years," I said. "He volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. He's learning to play guitar with money he earned himself by helping our neighbor with yard work. He's accomplished plenty, even without private schools and trust funds." "And those are wonderful achievements," my mother said in the tone she might use to praise a particularly well-behaved dog. "For his circumstances. But Jessica, you have to understand that Emma and Sophie are being prepared for a different kind of life. Private school, college prep, social expectations. Having Tyler here, seeing the differences, it raises uncomfortable questions that we're not ready to address with 9-year-olds. Uncomfortable questions like why some children had more than others. Uncomfortable questions about fairness and privilege and the arbitrary nature of economic circumstances. Uncomfortable questions that might force Emma and Sophie to think critically about their advantages, instead of simply accepting them as their due. So you want to hide Tyler away so the twins don't have to learn that the world contains people who aren't rich? Don't be ridiculous, my father snapped, his reasonable facade slipping slightly. This isn't about money. Then what is it about? He exchanged a look with my mother and Amanda, one of those wordless communications that I'd been excluded from my entire life. The look that said we need to handle her carefully, that said she's being difficult again, that said why can't she just understand what's best for everyone? It's about maintaining family harmony, he said finally. It's about creating an environment where everyone can enjoy the holidays without complications. Complications. That's what Tyler was to them. Not a grandson, not a nephew, not a family member who deserved love and inclusion. A complication that interfered with their perfect holiday tableau. Tyler isn't a complication, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. He's a child who loves you. He spent his allowance money on gifts for all of you. He's been practicing Christmas carols to sing after dinner. He wrote a poem about gratitude that he wanted to share tonight. He thinks you're wonderful people who care about him. And we do care about him, my mother insisted, but her words sounded hollow even to her own ears. No, you don't. You tolerate him when it's convenient and exclude him when it's not. You make him feel like he has to earn his place at this table, like his love for you isn't enough to guarantee him a seat at Christmas dinner. Amanda crossed her arms, her defensive posture revealing that she knew exactly how cruel they were being. Jessica, you're being emotional about this. We're trying to make a rational decision that's best for everyone involved. Everyone except Tyler. Tyler will be fine, she said dismissively. Children are resilient. He'll understand when he's older. He'll understand when he's older that his family thought he wasn't good enough to share their Christmas dinner. He'll understand when he's older that his handmade gifts and eager love weren't sufficient to earn him a place at their table. He'll understand when he's older that being poor was a moral failing in their eyes, something that disqualified him from belonging. Amanda, I said slowly, do you remember what it felt like to be excluded from something you really wanted to be part of? She shifted uncomfortably. That's different. Is it? Do you remember high school, when the popular girls wouldn't let you sit at their lunch table? Do you remember how that felt? This isn't the same thing at all. You're right. It's worse. Because we're supposed to be family. We're supposed to love each other unconditionally. We're supposed to protect each other, especially the children. And instead, you're teaching Emma and Sophie that love comes with conditions, that family membership depends on meeting certain financial criteria. My father cleared his throat, signaling that he was about to end this conversation with his final word on the matter. Jessica, we've made our decision. You're welcome to stay for dinner, of course. But Tyler, well, perhaps it would be better if he spent the evening somewhere he'd be more comfortable. More comfortable. As if being rejected by his family would somehow be comfortable for a 12-year-old boy who'd been counting down the days until Christmas Eve. And where exactly do you suggest he go? It's Christmas Eve. His friends are with their families. The community center dinner doesn't start until 7, and it's for families who have nowhere else to go. I'm sure you'll figure something out, Amanda said with false brightness. You're very resourceful. Resourceful. Another euphemism, this one for poor but trying hard. Resourceful meant I'd found ways to stretch grocery budgets and turn yard sale finds into treasures. Resourceful meant I'd taught Tyler that love was more valuable than money, that kindness mattered more than possessions. Resourceful meant I'd built a good life for my son, despite having no help from the people who were supposed to support us. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, I said. You want me to tell my 12-year-old son that there's no room for him at Christmas dinner with his family because his presence might make his cousins ask uncomfortable questions about why some people have more money than others? You're oversimplifying, my mother protested. Am I? Because that's exactly what you're doing. You're choosing the comfort of privileged children over the inclusion of a child who's never asked for anything but love. Jessica, please don't make this harder than it needs to be, Amanda said. We're not trying to hurt anyone, we're just trying to do what's best for our children. Your children, not Tyler. Tyler isn't our responsibility, she said quietly, and there it was. The truth, they'd been dancing around for years. Tyler wasn't their responsibility, because he was mine alone, because I'd made choices they didn't approve of, because I'd failed to build the kind of life that would make them proud to claim us. Tyler is your nephew, I said. He's your grandson. He's part of this family whether you like it or not. Of course he's family, my father said impatiently. But family doesn't mean everyone gets exactly what they want all the time. Sometimes we have to make difficult choices for the greater good. The greater good. As if excluding a child from Christmas dinner could possibly serve any good purpose, greater or otherwise. That's when I heard it. The sound that broke my heart and hardened my resolve in the same instant. From the hallway came Tyler's voice, high and confused and trembling on the edge of tears. Mom? What's happening? Why is everyone talking so quietly? He must have finished arranging his gifts and come looking for us, probably wondering why the adults had disappeared into the kitchen for such a long whispered conversation. I turned toward the doorway, where my son stood in his red sweater and carefully combed hair, his brown eyes wide with the kind of instinctive knowledge that children have when something is terribly wrong. Tyler, honey, I started, but Amanda cut me off. Tyler, she said with false cheerfulness, we were just talking about dinner arrangements. It turns out we're going to have a smaller group tonight than we planned. He looked around at all of us, his 12-year-old mind trying to process the tension in the room, the guilty expressions on his grandparents' faces, the way Amanda was smiling too brightly while avoiding his eyes. Smaller how? He asked, and his voice was so small, so uncertain that I wanted to gather him up and carry him away from these people who couldn't see what a gift he was. My mother stepped forward, her hostess smile firmly in place. Well, sweetheart, it turns out the dining room table isn't quite as big as we thought. We can only fit 7 people comfortably. Tyler looked confused, but there are 8 of us. Me, Mom, Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt Amanda, Uncle Mark, Emma, and Sophie. That's 8. Yes, well, my father said awkwardly. That's the problem. I watched my son's face as understanding began to dawn. His eyes went from confused to hurt to something that looked like panic as he realized what they were telling him. You mean there's no room for me? He whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. None of them could bring themselves to say yes, but none of them contradicted him either. They just stood there, these grown adults, letting a child draw his own conclusions about his worth in their eyes. But I made gifts, Tyler said, his voice getting smaller with each word. I've been working on them for weeks. I made Grandpa an ornament for the tree, and I made Grandma a bookmark with her favorite flower, and I made Emma and Sophie painted rocks, and I made Aunt Amanda a friendship bracelet. And they're beautiful gifts, sweetheart, my mother said, but her words rang hollow. We'll treasure them. But I can't stay for dinner? Another terrible silence. Tyler looked from face to face, searching for someone who would explain how this made sense. How the people who were supposed to love him could decide he wasn't worth a place at their table. It's not that we don't want you here, Amanda said finally, though her tone suggested exactly the opposite. It's just that tonight is more of an adult gathering. But Emma and Sophie are staying, Tyler pointed out with the devastating logic of childhood. They're not adults. Well, they're different, Amanda fumbled. Different how? And there it was. The question that none of them wanted to answer honestly. Different because their parents had money. Different because they attended private school. Different because they lived in the right neighborhood and wore the right clothes and fit the image this family wanted to project. Different because they were worthy, and Tyler wasn't. I looked at these people who shared my DNA, these people who had raised me to believe that family meant something, and I felt a clarity that I'd never experienced before. This wasn't about Christmas dinner. This wasn't about table space or adult conversations or maintaining family harmony. This was about power. About who got to decide who belonged and who didn't. About who got to determine worth and value and deserving. And I was done letting them make those decisions about my son. Tyler, I said quietly, go get your coat. We're leaving. But Mom, he started, his eyes filling with tears. What about Christmas dinner? What about the gifts I made? We'll have our own Christmas dinner, I told him. And your gifts are perfect. They deserve to be appreciated by people who understand how special they are. My mother made a sound of protest, Jessica, don't be hasty. We can work something out. No, I said, and my voice was steadier than it had ever been. We can't. Because this isn't about logistics or table space or adult conversations. This is about the fact that you've decided my son isn't good enough for your Christmas table, and I'm not going to let him internalize that message for one more second. That's not what we decided, my father said. Then what did you decide, Dad? Explain to Tyler why there's room for everyone except him. Tell him why his cousins deserve Christmas dinner with their grandparents, but he doesn't. He couldn't do it. None of them could. Because there was no explanation that didn't reveal the ugly truth about who they really were. Get your coat, Tyler, I repeated. We're going home. As my son went to collect his things, moving slowly like someone in a dream, I turned back to face the three people who had just shown me their true colors. You have no idea what you just did, I said quietly. You have no idea who you just rejected. Jessica, please, my mother started. No, you don't get to please me now. You don't get to pretend this was anything other than cruelty disguised as practicality. Tyler appeared in the doorway with his coat and the bag containing all his carefully crafted gifts. He looked so small, so defeated, that I felt something break inside my chest. But I also felt something else. Something that had been building for 3 years of slights and dismissals and casual cruelties. Something that these people had no idea was coming. Tyler, I said, putting my arm around his shoulders, I need you to remember something. This isn't about you. This isn't because you did anything wrong or because you're not good enough. This is about them. And someday, they're going to realize what a mistake they made tonight. As we walked toward the front door, Tyler carrying his rejected gifts, I turned back one last time. Enjoy your dinner, I said to the three people standing frozen in the kitchen doorway. Enjoy your perfect, exclusive, comfortable dinner. But remember this moment. Remember the choice you made. Because this is the last time you'll get to make it. And then Tyler and I walked out into the snow, leaving behind the family that had never deserved us in the first place. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly suspect, was that this rejection was about to become the best thing that ever happened to us. Because while they'd been judging us for the past 3 years, I'd been documenting them. And tomorrow they were going to learn exactly what kind of family they really were. The snow was falling harder as Tyler and I walked to my 10-year-old Honda Civic, parked behind Amanda's gleaming BMW in my parents' circular driveway. The contrast between our vehicles seemed like a perfect metaphor for everything that had just happened inside. Their car was pristine, expensive, a symbol of success and stability. Mine was reliable but worn, with a small dent in the rear bumper from where I'd backed into a post at the diner's parking lot last month. Tyler climbed into the passenger seat without saying a word, clutching his bag of rejected gifts against his chest like a shield. The silence stretched between us as I started the engine and waited for the heater to kick in. Through the windshield, I could see the warm glow of my parents' house, the perfectly decorated windows, the life we'd just been expelled from. Mom, Tyler said finally, his voice thick with unshed tears. Did I do something wrong? I turned to look at my son, this beautiful boy who had never done anything but love his family with his whole heart, and felt a rage so pure it took my breath away. Not at him, never at him, but at the people who had made him question his own worth. No, sweetheart, I said, reaching over to smooth his dark hair. You didn't do anything wrong. Not one single thing. Then why don't they want me there? How do you explain to a 12-year-old that some people measure love by income levels? How do you tell a child that his family's affection comes with conditions he never knew existed? How do you make sense of something that is fundamentally senseless? Sometimes, I said carefully, adults make decisions that don't make sense. Sometimes they let things that shouldn't matter become more important than things that should matter. Tyler was quiet for a moment, processing this. Like money? Out of the mouths of babes. My son had identified the core issue with the clarity that only children possess, cutting through all the euphemisms and justifications to the ugly truth underneath. Yeah, I said softly, like money. But money isn't more important than family, Tyler said, and his voice held such conviction that it broke my heart all over again. No, it's not. You're absolutely right about that. Then why do they think it is? I put the car in reverse and began backing out of the driveway, buying myself time to think. As we pulled away from the house, I saw Amanda at the front window, watching us leave. She raised her hand in a small wave, but I didn't wave back. I don't know why they think that, I told Tyler honestly, but I know that you deserve better. We both do. The drive back to our apartment above Rossetti's Pizza took 20 minutes, and for most of it, Tyler stared out the window at the Christmas lights decorating the houses we passed. Each display told a story of families gathered together, of traditions being shared, of belonging. I wondered what he was thinking, whether he was imagining himself in those warm-lit rooms, whether he was wondering why some children got unconditional love while others had to earn it. Our neighborhood was different from my parents' suburb. The houses were smaller, closer together, some of them needing paint or new shutters. But there was something my parents' neighborhood lacked, something I'd learned to appreciate over the years we'd lived here. There was authenticity. Realness. People who struggled but supported each other, who understood that community wasn't about appearance but about showing up for one another. Mrs. Chen from the corner house was outside putting fresh batteries in her inflatable snowman display. She waved when she saw our car, the same enthusiastic wave she gave us every morning when Tyler walked to the bus stop. Mr. Rodriguez from 2 doors down was stringing lights around his porch railing, taking his time to get each strand perfectly positioned. These were our neighbors, our real family, the people who had celebrated Tyler's achievements and comforted us during hard times without ever making us feel like we needed to be anything other than ourselves. I parked in the narrow alley behind our building, next to the dumpster that served both our apartment and Rossetti's restaurant below. The smell of garlic and oregano drifted up from the kitchen vents, a familiar comfort that meant home. Tony Rossetti had been our landlord for 6 years, ever since Tyler and I had moved out of my parents' house when the helpful suggestions and worried looks became too much to bear. Tony had never once raised our rent, even when other landlords in the area started charging more. He knew I worked hard, knew I was doing my best, and that was enough for him. Are you hungry? I asked Tyler as we climbed the stairs to our second-floor apartment. I could make us some spaghetti. Not really, he said quietly. I unlocked our door and flipped on the lights, illuminating our small but cozy living space. Our Christmas tree stood in the corner by the window, a 6-foot Fraser fir that Tyler and I had picked out together at the lot downtown. It wasn't as perfectly shaped as the trees in the magazines, and our ornaments were a mix of handmade creations and drugstore finds, but it was ours. Every decoration told a story, held a memory, represented a moment of joy in our life together. Tyler set his bag of gifts on the coffee table and sank into our second-hand couch, which I'd covered with a colorful throw blanket to hide the worn spots on the arms. He looked so small sitting there, so defeated, that I wanted to drive back to my parents' house and make them look at what their rejection had done to this sweet boy. Instead, I sat down beside him and pulled him into a hug. He melted against me the way he had when he was little, when I could still fix everything with cuddles and warm milk and bedtime stories. I hate them, he whispered into my shoulder. No, you don't, I said gently. You're hurt and you're angry, and that's okay. But you don't hate them. I wanted to show them my gifts, he said, his voice muffled by my sweater. I wanted Grandpa to see the ornament I made him. I wanted to tell Grandma about my art project that got displayed in the school hallway. I wanted Emma and Sophie to see the rocks I painted for them. I know, sweetheart. I know. They don't love me, do they? The question hung in the air between us, and I felt the weight of having to find an answer that was both honest and kind. Because the truth was complicated. Did my parents and sister love Tyler in their own limited way? Probably. But was their love conditional, shallow, inadequate? Absolutely. They love you the only way they know how, I said finally. But their way isn't very good. It's not the kind of love you deserve. Tyler pulled back to look at me, his brown eyes red-rimmed but thoughtful. What kind of love do I deserve? The kind that doesn't depend on what you wear or where you live, or how much money your mom makes, I said firmly. The kind that celebrates who you are, not what you have. The kind that makes room for you at every table, especially the important ones. He nodded slowly, absorbing this. Like the way Mrs. Chen always saves me the biggest cookie when she bakes, and the way Mr. Rodriguez taught me to change a tire even though I'm just a kid, and the way Tony lets me help in the restaurant kitchen when you're working late. Exactly like that, I said, my heart swelling with pride at his ability to recognize real love when he saw it. Those people see your value. They appreciate your kindness and your curiosity and your generous heart. That's the kind of love that matters. Tyler was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Mom, why don't Grandma and Grandpa see those things in me?" It was such an innocent question, and such a devastating one. How do you explain to a child that some people are so blinded by superficial concerns that they miss the beautiful souls right in front of them? Sometimes, I said carefully, people get so focused on things that don't really matter that they forget to pay attention to things that do matter. It's not about you, Tyler. It's about them. But it feels like it's about me. I know it does, and I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry they made you feel like you weren't good enough, because you are more than good enough. You are extraordinary. Tyler managed a small smile at that, the first I'd seen since we left my parents' house. You have to say that. You're my mom. I say it because it's true, I corrected. Ask Mrs. Chen what she thinks about you. Ask your teachers. Ask Tony. Ask anyone who really knows you. They'll all tell you the same thing. As we sat there on our couch, wrapped in our worn throw blanket, I felt something shifting inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and fresh, but underneath it was something else. Something that had been building for 3 years of casual dismissals and subtle rejections. Determination. My family thought they could exclude Tyler because he didn't meet their standards. They thought they could reject us because we didn't fit their image of success. They thought they could make decisions about our worth based on their narrow definitions of value. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Tyler," I said, "I need to tell you something important." He sat up straighter, sensing the change in my tone. "For the past 3 years, ever since we moved into this apartment, I've been working on something. Something big." "What kind of something?" I got up and walked to the small desk in the corner where I did paperwork and helped Tyler with homework. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out a folder that I'd been adding to for years. A folder that contained documentation of every slight, every dismissal, every moment when my family had shown their true colors. "I've been keeping track," I said, returning to the couch with the folder in my hands. "Every conversation, every email, every decision they made about us. I've been building a record of who they really are." Tyler looked confused. "Why?" "Because I knew this day would come," I said simply. "I knew that eventually they would go too far. And when they did, I wanted to be ready." I opened the folder and showed Tyler the first document. It was a printout of an email exchange between my mother and Amanda from 6 months ago, discussing whether Tyler should be invited to Emma and Sophie's birthday party. "How did you get this?" Tyler asked, his eyes wide. "Your Aunt Amanda uses the same password for everything," I said with a small smile. "The name of her first pet, followed by her wedding year. She mentioned it once at a family dinner 2 years ago when she was complaining about having to reset her work email. She thought it was a funny story about how predictable she was." Tyler read the email, his expression growing more serious with each line. In it, Amanda expressed concern about Tyler's influence on her daughters, worried that his different lifestyle might make them ask uncomfortable questions about fairness and inequality. She suggested limiting his invitations to family events, especially ones involving other children. "She really wrote this about me?" Tyler asked quietly. "She did. And there's more." I showed him screenshots of text messages between my parents and Amanda, discussing my work schedule and wondering aloud whether I was really trying to better my situation or if I was comfortable being dependent. There were emails about Tyler's school performance, with my father questioning whether public school was adequately preparing him for the real world. There were conversations about Christmas gifts, with detailed discussions about spending limits that made it clear they thought anything under $50 was embarrassing. They talk about us like we're a problem to solve, Tyler observed, and his voice held a maturity that broke my heart. Yes, they do. But Tyler, here's what they don't understand. While they were talking about us like we were problems, I was solving actual problems. Real ones. I reached for my laptop and opened a spreadsheet that I'd been working on for months. Remember how I told you I've been taking online business classes? Tyler nodded. Well, those classes weren't just for fun. I've been learning about accounting, marketing, business management, legal requirements for small businesses. And I've been saving money. Every extra penny from tips. Every overtime shift. Every small bonus from covering for other waitresses. I turned the laptop screen toward him, showing him the balance in a savings account he'd never known existed. $47,000, I said quietly. Tyler's eyes went wide. $47,000? How? 3 years of working double shifts while you were in school. 3 years of buying generic groceries and shopping at thrift stores and cutting every corner I could find. 3 years of eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch so I could save $5 a day. 3 years of sacrificing small comforts so we could have something bigger. But why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted it to be a surprise. And because I wanted to be sure it would work before I got your hopes up. I opened another tab on the laptop, showing Tyler a business plan I'd been developing with my online courses. I'm buying Murphy's Diner. Tyler's mouth fell open. You're buying the restaurant where you work? Old Pete wants to retire, and he's been looking for someone to take over. Someone who knows the business, who cares about the customers, who understands what the place means to the community. He's been hinting about it for months, and last week, he finally made me an offer. I scrolled through the documents on my screen, showing Tyler the preliminary purchase agreement, the loan applications, the business projections I'd spent months perfecting. The diner comes with a small apartment upstairs, the one Pete uses for storage. It needs work, but it's bigger than this place. 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, even a small office where you could do homework. Tyler was staring at me, like I'd just revealed I could fly. So we'd live above your own restaurant. Our restaurant, I corrected. This is for both of us, Tyler. This is our future. But what does this have to do with Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Amanda? I smiled, and for the first time all evening, it was a genuine smile. Because, sweetheart, while they were deciding we weren't successful enough to deserve a place at their table, I was building something that's going to make their little suburban empire look like a house of cards. I showed Tyler another folder on my laptop, this one labeled Financial Research. Inside were detailed reports on my father's bank, Amanda's marketing firm, and Mark's accounting practice. Remember when I told you that Aunt Amanda uses the same password for everything? Well, that includes her work email. And Uncle Mark, he's not much better with digital security. Tyler looked confused and a little worried. Mom, is this legal? Everything I found is public record, honey. Bank examination reports, business licensing documents, client complaint filings, professional ethics reviews. It just takes knowing where to look and having the patience to dig through a lot of boring paperwork. I opened the first report, showing Tyler a summary of violations at my father's bank. Your grandfather has been cutting corners on loan documentation, approving mortgages for people who can't afford them, and covering up the problems when those loans go bad. The next report detailed Amanda's marketing firm, which had been charging clients for services they weren't providing and using subcontracted work while billing for premium in-house services. And Uncle Mark, I said, opening the final report, has been helping clients hide income from the IRS, not reporting it himself, just looking the other way when their numbers don't add up. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, processing everything I'd shown him. So they're all breaking the rules? They're all cutting ethical corners to maintain lifestyles they can't actually afford, I said. Your grandfather's bank is going to fail its next federal examination. Aunt Amanda's firm is about to lose its biggest client for breach of contract. And Uncle Mark's accounting license is under review by the state board. How do you know all this? Because I've been paying attention for 3 years while they've been ignoring us. Because I've been learning how their world really works while they've been pretending I'm too poor and stupid to understand it. Tyler looked back at the savings account balance on my laptop screen. So when you buy the diner, when I buy the diner, we'll own something real. Something that serves our community. Something that provides honest work. Something that we built with our own hands and our own sacrifices. While their whole lives are built on lies and shortcuts and borrowed money. I closed the laptop and turned to face my son directly. Tyler, what happened tonight was cruel and unfair. But it was also a gift, because it showed us exactly who they are. And now we get to show them exactly who we are. What do you mean? I mean that tomorrow, I'm going to call Pete and accept his offer. I'm going to buy Murphy's Diner and start the next chapter of our lives. And when your grandparents and aunt and uncle realize that the people they excluded from their table have built something more successful and more meaningful than anything they've ever accomplished, they're going to understand what a mistake they made. Tyler was quiet again, thinking. But what if they try to apologize? What if they want to be part of our new life? Then they'll have to prove they've changed, I said. They'll have to show us that they understand what family really means. And they'll have to accept that we don't need their approval anymore. Do you think they will? Change, I mean? I considered this honestly. I don't know. Maybe. People can surprise you sometimes. But Tyler, here's what I want you to understand. We're not doing this to get revenge on them. We're doing this to build the life we deserve. We're doing this to show you that your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions, that success isn't about impressing people who don't appreciate you anyway. Tyler nodded slowly, and I could see him beginning to straighten up, beginning to shed the defeated posture he'd carried since we left my parents' house. So tomorrow we start over? He asked. Tomorrow we start building, I corrected. The foundation was already there, sweetheart. We just didn't realize how strong it was. As if on cue, there was a knock at our door. Tyler and I looked at each other, both wondering who would be visiting on Christmas Eve. I opened the door to find Mrs. Chen standing in the hallway, holding a covered casserole dish and wearing the biggest smile I'd ever seen. "Jessica, Tyler," she said warmly. "I saw you come home early and thought you might like some company. I made too much food for Christmas Eve dinner, and I hate to eat alone." Behind her, Mr. Rodriguez appeared with a plate of tamales, and Tony came up the stairs from the restaurant carrying a tray of antipasto. "We thought maybe we could have our own celebration," Tony said with a grin. "If you don't mind some last-minute guests." I felt tears spring to my eyes, but for the first time all day, they were tears of gratitude rather than grief. "We would love some company," I said, stepping aside to let our real family into our home. As our neighbors filled our small apartment with laughter and food and genuine warmth, Tyler caught my eye and smiled. Really smiled, with his whole face lighting up the way it did when he was truly happy. "This is better than Grandma's house," he whispered to me as Mrs. Chen helped him arrange her cookies on our coffee table next to his rejected gifts. "Yes," I whispered back, "it really is." And as I watched my son laugh with people who saw his value without condition, I felt the last of my doubt disappear. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But tonight, surrounded by chosen family in our humble home, we had everything we needed. We had each other, and we had the truth about who we were and what we were capable of. That was more than enough to build a future on. Christmas morning dawned crisp and bright, with fresh snow covering the alley behind our apartment building like a clean slate. Tyler woke me up at 7:30, not with the frantic excitement of previous Christmas mornings, but with a quiet contentment that told me something fundamental had shifted in him overnight. He padded into my bedroom, wearing his favorite pajamas, the ones with cartoon rockets that he'd outgrown but refused to give up. "Mom," he said, perching on the edge of my bed, "I had the best dream." I sat up, rubbing sleep from my eyes. "Tell me about it." "I dreamed that our restaurant had a big Christmas party, and everyone in the neighborhood came. Mrs. Chen brought her famous dumplings, and Mr. Rodriguez played guitar, and Tony made his special lasagna. And there were kids there, lots of kids, and they all wanted to be my friend not because of what I had, but because of who I was." I pulled him into a hug, marveling at how resilient children could be when they felt truly loved. "That sounds like a wonderful dream." "It didn't feel like a dream, though," Tyler said thoughtfully. "It felt like a memory of something that's going to happen." After we opened our modest pile of presents, Tyler insisting that every gift was perfect despite their humble wrapping, I made us breakfast while he played with his new art supplies. The phone rang as I was flipping pancakes, and I almost didn't answer when I saw my mother's name on the caller ID. Jessica? Linda's voice was tentative, uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. I hope I'm not calling too early. It's fine, Mom. What do you need? There was a long pause, filled with the kind of silence that comes when someone is trying to find words for something they've never had to say before. I wanted to apologize for last night. We handled things poorly. I set down my spatula and leaned against the kitchen counter. You handled things exactly as you intended to handle them. That's not true. We were trying to avoid conflict, and instead we created a much bigger problem. You didn't create a problem, Mom. You revealed one. There's a difference. Another pause. Tyler is our grandson. Of course he belongs at family dinners. But he didn't belong last night, did he? Not according to Dad and Amanda. Your father feels terrible about the whole situation. Amanda, too. We were wondering if you might consider coming for dinner today. New Year's Day. We could start fresh. I looked over at Tyler, who was carefully organizing his new colored pencils by shade, completely absorbed in creating order from chaos. He looked peaceful in a way he rarely did after family gatherings, and I realized that protecting that peace was more important than preserving relationships that had never truly nurtured either of us. Mom, I said quietly, do you know what Tyler said to me last night after we left your house? What? He asked me if he had done something wrong. Your 12-year-old grandson, who spent weeks making gifts for people he loves, asked me if he had somehow caused his own exclusion from Christmas dinner. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. And do you know what I realized in that moment? I realized that I've been so busy trying to make you accept us that I forgot to protect him from your rejection. I've been teaching him to beg for love from people who think it's a commodity to be earned rather than a gift to be given freely. Jessica, please. We love Tyler. No, you love the idea of Tyler when it's convenient for you. You love him when he's not asking uncomfortable questions or requiring you to examine your own values. You love him when he can be tucked away quietly and brought out for photographs and holiday cards. That's not fair. What's not fair is telling a child there's no room for him at his family's table. What's not fair is teaching him that love comes with conditions he was never told about. What's not fair is making him feel responsible for adult decisions that have nothing to do with his worth as a human being. My mother was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. I don't know how to fix this. I don't think you can fix it, Mom. Not with apologies or do-overs or fresh starts. Because this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice that revealed what you really believe about family and love and value. So what are you saying? That we can't be part of Tyler's life anymore? I considered this carefully, because it was exactly the question I'd been wrestling with since we left their house. I'm saying that if you want to be part of our lives, you're going to have to prove that you've fundamentally changed how you see us. Not just Tyler, but both of us. You're going to have to demonstrate that you understand why what you did was wrong, and that you're committed to never doing anything like it again. How do we do that? I don't know, Mom. That's something you'll have to figure out for yourselves. After I hung up, Tyler looked up from his art supplies. Was that Grandma? Yes. Did she want us to come back for another dinner? She did. Tyler considered this for a moment, then went back to his coloring. I think I'd rather stay home and work on my restaurant designs. I smiled, struck by his instinctive wisdom. Restaurant designs? For when we buy Murphy's Diner, I have ideas about how to make it more fun for kids. Maybe we could have a kids' corner with books and drawing supplies, so families with little kids would want to come eat there. That's a brilliant idea, Tyler. And maybe we could have art contests, where kids could draw pictures and we'd hang them on the walls. Real art shows, where their families could come see their work displayed like in a gallery. I sat down next to him at our small kitchen table, amazed at how quickly he'd moved from victim to visionary. What else? Well, I was thinking about what you said last night, about building something that serves the community. Maybe we could have special nights for different groups. Like, senior citizens could get discounts on Tuesdays, and maybe we could have a night where kids eat free if they bring their report cards. Tyler, these are incredible ideas. I want our restaurant to be the kind of place where everyone feels welcome, he said simply, where no one ever has to worry about whether they belong. That afternoon, while Tyler worked on his restaurant sketches, I called Pete Murphy to accept his offer. Pete was spending Christmas Day with his daughter's family in Columbus, but he was so excited to hear from me that he stayed on the phone for almost an hour, walking me through the details of the transition. "I've been hoping you'd say yes," he told me. "You know this place better than anyone, and you understand what it means to people. It's not just a restaurant, it's a gathering place, a second home for folks who need one." "That's exactly what I want to preserve," I said, "and expand on. I've got all the paperwork ready to go. We can meet with the lawyers next week and start the official process. If everything goes smoothly, you could take over by Valentine's Day." After we hung up, I sat in my small living room, looking around at the apartment that had been our home for 6 years. It wasn't much by my family's standards, but it had been ours. We'd been happy here, safe here, loved here by neighbors who cared about us for who we were rather than what we owned. Tyler appeared beside me, carrying his sketchbook. "Mom, can I show you something?" He opened to a page covered with detailed drawings of restaurant layouts, complete with the kids' corner he'd described, a reading nook with comfortable chairs, and even a small stage area for local musicians and poetry readings. "Tyler, this is amazing. How did you think of all this?" "I've been watching people at Murphy's when I come in after school," he said. "I notice things, like how Mrs. Patterson always sits in the corner booth because her hearing aid makes it hard for her to follow conversations in noisy spaces. And how the Johnson kids always get restless waiting for their food, and their mom looks embarrassed when they start acting up." I stared at my son, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. While I'd been focused on protecting him from my family's judgment, he'd been developing his own vision of how the world could be better. While I'd been documenting their failures, he'd been designing solutions to real problems. "You know what I think?" I said. "I think you're going to be an amazing business partner." Tyler grinned, the first completely unguarded smile I'd seen from him since before we left my parents' house. "Really? I can help run the restaurant?" "Age appropriately, but yes. These ideas are too good not to implement." That evening, as we heated up leftover lasagna from Tony's Christmas contribution, I got a text message from Amanda. It was long and rambling, full of apologies and explanations and requests for forgiveness. She wrote about how the holidays were stressful, how Mark had been under pressure at work, how the twins were going through a difficult phase. She insisted that the whole situation had been a misunderstanding, that they'd never intended to hurt Tyler, that family was the most important thing, and surely we could move past this unfortunate incident. I showed the message to Tyler, who read it carefully before handing my phone back. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think she's sorry she got caught, not sorry for what she did," Tyler said with startling insight. "What makes you say that?" "Because she's explaining why it wasn't really her fault, instead of taking responsibility for hurting my feelings. When I do something wrong and apologize to you, I don't spend the whole apology talking about why I had good reasons for doing the wrong thing." Out of the mouths of babes, again. My 12-year-old son had identified the fundamental flaw in Amanda's message with perfect clarity. I didn't respond to the text. Over the next week, my phone rang constantly. My parents called multiple times, Amanda sent daily messages, even Mark reached out with an awkward voicemail about family healing and moving forward. They were all operating from the same playbook, treating the situation like a minor family squabble that could be resolved with enough apologies and invitations. None of them seemed to understand that this wasn't about Christmas dinner. This was about Tyler's fundamental worth as a human being, about the message they'd sent to a child about his place in the world, about the casual cruelty they displayed when they thought there would be no consequences. Meanwhile, Tyler and I threw ourselves into planning our new venture. We spent hours at Murphy's Diner after my shifts, measuring spaces and sketching layouts and interviewing longtime customers about what they'd like to see in the restaurant's future. Pete was delighted by our enthusiasm and surprised by Tyler's sophisticated understanding of customer service and community building. "This boy's got the gift," Pete told me one afternoon as Tyler explained his idea for themed dinner nights to a group of regular customers. "He sees people, really sees them. That's the secret to the restaurant business." Tyler did see people. I watched him notice when elderly customers struggled with the small print on menus and suggest we create large print versions. I saw him observe families with young children and design quiet spaces where parents could actually enjoy their meals. He paid attention to the teenagers who came in after school, noting that they needed places to do homework and charge their phones. Most businesses try to serve everyone the same way, Tyler explained to me one evening as we walked home from the diner. But people have different needs. If we pay attention to what people actually need, instead of just what we think they should want, we can make everyone feel welcome. 2 weeks after Christmas, my mother showed up at Murphy's Diner during my lunch shift. I saw her through the kitchen window, sitting in a booth by herself, looking completely out of place in her pressed slacks and cashmere sweater among the construction workers and nurses and retirees who made up our usual crowd. I finished taking an order from a table of teachers, celebrating the end of winter break, then walked over to where my mother sat, clutching her purse like a shield. "Mom," I said, sliding into the seat across from her, "this is unexpected." "I've been thinking about our phone conversation," she said without preamble. "About what you said, about proving that we've changed." "Okay. I want to understand what we did wrong. Really understand, not just apologize. Because that's what you want to hear." I studied her face, looking for signs of the practiced sincerity she'd perfected for church committees and neighborhood associations. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before: genuine uncertainty. "Tell me what you think you did wrong," I said. Linda took a shaky breath. "We made Tyler feel unwanted. We prioritized Amanda's children over him. We treated him like he was less important because—" She struggled with the words. "Because you don't have as much money as she does." "Go on." "We taught him that love has conditions, that belonging has to be earned, that family isn't really family unless you meet certain standards." I waited, sensing there was more. "And we hurt you too," she continued, her voice getting smaller. "We made you feel like you'd failed, like you weren't good enough, like the life you'd built for Tyler wasn't sufficient. We judged you for being a single mother, for working at a diner, for living in a small apartment, for all the things that don't actually matter. What does matter, Mom? Tyler's happiness, his security, his knowledge that he's loved unconditionally. Your happiness too, Jessica. Your right to build the life you choose without our judgment or interference." I felt something loosening in my chest, a knot of hurt and anger that had been there so long I'd forgotten it wasn't a permanent part of me. "Why now?" I asked. "What changed?" "I've been watching you these past 2 weeks," she admitted, "coming here, seeing you at work, observing how people respond to you. Jessica, you're respected here. People light up when they see you. They trust you with their problems. They celebrate their good news with you. They depend on you." She gestured around the diner, taking in the mismatched furniture and the handwritten specials board and the coffee-stained countertops. "This place isn't fancy, but it's full of love. And you're the heart of it. You've built something real here, something that matters to people's lives. And I've been too proud and too stupid to see it." A customer at a nearby table waved me over to refill his coffee, and I excused myself for a moment. When I returned, my mother was wiping her eyes with a paper napkin. "I heard you're buying this place," she said. "Pete told you? He's very proud of you. He spent 20 minutes telling me about your business plan and Tyler's ideas for improvements. He said you're going to transform this place into something special. It's already special. We're just going to make it more accessible to more people." "Like Tyler's Kids Corner idea?" I was surprised she knew about that. Pete talks a lot, apparently. "Jessica, would it be possible for me to be involved somehow? Not financially," she added quickly. "I know you don't need my money. But maybe I could volunteer? Help with the kids' programming or the senior discount nights?" I stared at my mother, this woman who had never worked a day in food service, who had never volunteered for anything that didn't enhance her social standing, who had never shown interest in spending time with children other than her own grandchildren. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I want to understand your world," she said simply. "I want to be part of what you're building instead of criticizing what you've built. I want Tyler to see me as someone who supports his dreams instead of someone who judges his circumstances." Before I could respond, the bell above the door chimed, and Tyler walked in, still wearing his backpack from the after-school program. He stopped short when he saw my mother, his expression guarded but not hostile. "Hi, Grandma," he said carefully. "Hello, Tyler," Linda replied, and her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I was just telling your mom about how proud I am of your restaurant ideas." Tyler's eyebrows shot up. "You know about those? Pete showed me your sketches. The kids' corner is brilliant, and the reading nook is exactly what this place needs. You have a real gift for seeing what people need." Tyler glanced at me, checking to see if this conversation was safe to engage in. I nodded slightly, curious to see where it would lead. "I have lots more ideas," Tyler said cautiously. "Mom says I'm going to be her business partner." "I think you'll be an excellent business partner," Linda said. "You understand something that took me far too long to learn." "What's that?" "That the best businesses don't just serve food or provide services. They create community. They make people feel like they belong." Tyler considered this, then pulled out his sketchbook and opened it to his latest drawing. "Want to see my idea for the art wall?" For the next 30 minutes, I watched my mother listen to my son with the kind of attention she'd never given him before. She asked thoughtful questions about his designs, made suggestions that actually improved his ideas, and treated his 12-year-old insights with the respect they deserved. When other customers needed my attention, Linda stepped in to help Tyler organize his art supplies, and I saw her face transform as she watched him work. Gone was the polite grandmother smile she'd always worn around him. In its place was something genuine, something that looked like wonder. "Tyler," she said as he carefully shaded a drawing of families eating together, "I owe you an apology." He looked up from his sketch. "For Christmas Eve?" "For Christmas Eve, and for a lot of other times when I didn't see how special you are. I was so busy worrying about things that don't matter, that I missed the things that do matter." "Like what?" "Like your kind heart, like your creative mind, like the way you notice when people need help and think of ways to help them, like the way you see possibilities where other people see problems." Tyler set down his colored pencil and looked at his grandmother directly. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you really think I'm special? Or are you just saying that because Mom is mad at you?" Linda's face crumpled slightly, and I saw her struggle with the weight of that question. "Oh, Tyler, you are so special, and I've been such a fool for not seeing it before. You're creative and kind and wise, and you make everyone around you better just by being yourself." "Then why didn't you want me at Christmas dinner?" The simple directness of children. No euphemisms, no face-saving deflections. Just the core question that needed to be answered. "Because I was scared," Linda said finally. "I was scared that if Emma and Sophie saw how different your life is from theirs, they might start asking questions about fairness and money, and why some families have more than others. And I didn't want to have those conversations because they're hard and uncomfortable." "But those are important conversations," Tyler said. "Kids should understand that not everyone has the same things, so they can be grateful for what they have and kind to people who have less." "You're absolutely right," Linda said, and her voice was thick with tears. "Those are exactly the conversations we should be having, and you should be the one leading them, because you understand things that Emma and Sophie need to learn." "Like what?" "Like how to make friends with people who are different from you. Like how to appreciate gifts that were made with love instead of bought with money. Like how to include people instead of excluding them." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "I could teach them that, if they wanted to learn." "I think they do want to learn," Linda said. "I think they've been missing out by not having you as a teacher." By the time my shift ended, my mother had somehow become Tyler's co-conspirator in planning the restaurant's grand reopening. She'd volunteered to coordinate with local artists for the rotating gallery wall, suggested reaching out to the library for partnership opportunities, and offered to help design a website that would showcase the restaurant's community focus. "Mom," I said as we prepared to leave, "are you sure about this? It's going to be a lot of work. And it's not glamorous work." "Jessica," she said, "I've spent 20 years organizing charity galas and fundraising dinners for causes I didn't really care about, trying to impress people whose opinions don't actually matter. I'd rather spend my time building something real with people I love." "What about Dad? And Amanda?" Linda's expression grew more serious. Your father is struggling with his own realizations about the choices he's made. He's not ready to admit how wrong we were, but he's starting to see the consequences of his pride. As for Amanda, she sighed. Amanda is going to have to find her own way to understanding. I can't force her to change, but I can choose to change myself. And what if she doesn't change? What if Dad doesn't come around? Then they'll miss out on knowing the amazing people you and Tyler have become, Linda said firmly. And that will be their loss, not yours. 6 weeks later, Murphy's Diner reopened as Martina's family kitchen, with Tyler's Kids Corner, Linda's rotating art gallery, and a community bulletin board where neighbors could post job openings, babysitting offers, and invitations to local events. The grand opening celebration filled the restaurant with friends, neighbors, and customers who had become family over the years. Tyler wore a small apron with junior partner embroidered on the front, greeting guests and explaining the new features with the pride of someone who had helped build something meaningful. Linda worked behind the scenes, coordinating with local schools to schedule field trips and art showcases, finally finding a purpose that matched her organizational skills with her newfound understanding of community service. My father came to the opening, standing awkwardly near the door until Tyler spotted him and insisted on giving him the full tour. I watched my son explain his vision for the restaurant, his plans for monthly kids' art contests and senior citizens' storytelling nights, his dreams of making every customer feel valued and welcome. By the end of the evening, Robert was sitting in Tyler's reading nook, listening to a group of neighborhood children discuss their favorite books, while Tyler facilitated the conversation with the natural ease of someone who had always understood that real leadership means lifting others up. Amanda never came to the opening. She sent a card with a generic congratulations message, but she made no effort to understand what we'd built or why it mattered. Emma and Sophie remained strangers to their cousin, missing out on the chance to learn from a boy who could have taught them important lessons about empathy and inclusion, and the difference between having things and being happy. But their absence didn't diminish our joy. If anything, it clarified the difference between the family we'd been born into and the family we'd chosen to create. 3 months after the reopening, Tyler came home from school with news that made my heart swell with pride. His art project about community building had been selected for the district's showcase, and his teacher had asked him to present his work to a panel of local business leaders and city council members. She said my project shows real understanding of how businesses can serve communities instead of just making profit, Tyler told me, practically glowing with excitement. That's because you do understand that, I said. You've always understood that. I learned it from you, Mom. From watching you take care of people at the diner, from seeing how you made everyone feel important even when they couldn't tip very much. That night, as I tucked Tyler into his new bedroom above the restaurant, he asked me a question that brought our journey full circle. Mom, do you think Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Amanda learned anything from what happened? I considered this carefully. Grandma definitely learned something. She's still learning, every day. Grandpa is starting to understand, but it's harder for him because he spent so many years believing that success is about money and status. As for Aunt Amanda, she might never get it, Tyler finished. She might not. And that's sad for her, because she's missing out on knowing how amazing you are. But Tyler, here's what I want you to remember. Your worth isn't determined by whether other people recognize it. You are valuable because of who you are, not because of who appreciates you. Tyler smiled, the same genuine, unguarded smile that had become his trademark since we'd left my parents' house that snowy Christmas Eve. I know, Mom, I figured that out. How? Because look at what we built, he said simply. Look at all the people who come here every day, all the kids who feel welcome in our kids' corner, all the families who can afford to eat out, because we kept our prices fair. Look at how Mrs. Chen lights up when she sees her granddaughter's artwork on our gallery wall. Look at how Mr. Rodriguez's face changed when we asked him to play guitar for our monthly music nights. He was right. We had built something beautiful, something that served our community and reflected our values. We had created the kind of place where every person mattered, where children were welcomed and celebrated, where love was measured by presence rather than presence. Tyler, I said, I am so proud of the person you're becoming. I'm proud of us, Mom. I'm proud of what we built together. As I turned off his bedroom light and headed downstairs to do the evening cleanup in our restaurant, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed since that Christmas Eve, when my family decided there was no room for Tyler at their table. They had been wrong about so many things. They were wrong about Tyler's worth, wrong about our potential, wrong about what really mattered in life. But they had been right about one thing. There really wasn't room for Tyler at their table. Because Tyler deserved a bigger table. A table where everyone was welcome, where love wasn't conditional, where children were valued for their hearts rather than their circumstances. And now he had that table. We both did. The last customer had left, the lights were dimmed, and our restaurant was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerators and the distant sound of snow beginning to fall outside. I walked through our dining room, straightening chairs and wiping down tables, thinking about all the conversations that had happened here today, all the connections that had been made, all the small moments of joy and community that we had facilitated. This was what success looked like. Not crystal stemware and formal dining rooms and exclusionary guest lists. Not judgment and conditions and artificial standards of worth. Success looked like Tyler's Kids Corner, where children of all backgrounds played together while their parents enjoyed unhurried meals. Success looked like our art gallery wall, where local students saw their creativity valued and displayed. Success looked like our monthly community dinners, where neighbors became friends and no one ever ate alone. Success looked like a 12-year-old boy who understood that his value came from his character rather than his possessions, who had learned to build rather than exclude, who saw problems as opportunities to create solutions. My phone buzzed with a text message from Linda, who had become Tyler's biggest supporter and our restaurant's most dedicated volunteer. Tyler's presentation to the city council was incredible, she wrote. They want to feature Martinez Family Kitchen in the Community Development newsletter as an example of businesses that strengthen neighborhoods. You should be so proud. I was proud, not just of Tyler's recognition, but of the journey that had brought us here. We had been rejected by people who thought they knew our worth, and that rejection had freed us to build something more valuable than anything they could have offered us. The snow was falling harder now, covering the alley behind our restaurant with the same pristine whiteness that had blessed the night we walked away from my parents' house. But this time, the snow didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a promise of new beginnings, fresh possibilities, and the endless potential that comes from understanding that your worth isn't determined by other people's approval. Tyler and I had found our place in the world, and it wasn't at someone else's table. It was at our own table, where there was always room for one more, where love was the only currency that mattered, and where every person who walked through our doors knew they belonged. That was the greatest gift my family's rejection had given us, the freedom to create something better than what we'd lost. And we had created something magnificent. 1 year later, I stood in the doorway of Martinez Family Kitchen on a busy Saturday evening, watching Tyler demonstrate the proper way to fold napkins to a group of teenage volunteers from the local high school. At 13 now, he had grown 3 inches and gained a confidence that seemed to radiate from his very core. His voice carried the easy authority of someone who had learned that leadership meant teaching others rather than commanding them. The corner should align perfectly with the opposite edge, he explained to Maria, a 15-year-old whose family had recently moved to the neighborhood from Guatemala. It's not just about making it look neat. When customers see that we pay attention to small details, they know we'll pay attention to the big ones too. Maria nodded seriously, practicing the fold while Tyler moved on to show Jake, a shy 16-year-old who reminded me painfully of Tyler at that age, how to arrange the silverware so that left-handed customers wouldn't have to reach across their plates. These kids came to our restaurant after school and on weekends, not because they needed community service hours or because their parents forced them, but because Tyler had created something they wanted to be part of. The Martinez Family Kitchen Youth Leadership Program had started 6 months ago when Tyler approached me with a proposal written in his careful handwriting on notebook paper. He'd noticed that many of his classmates struggled with confidence and direction, particularly kids whose families were dealing with financial stress or language barriers. He wanted to create a program where teenagers could learn business skills while earning money and building community connections. It's not charity, he'd explained to me that evening as we reviewed his proposal over dinner. It's opportunity. These kids don't need someone to feel sorry for them. They need someone to believe in what they can accomplish. Now, watching him guide his team through the evening rush with the patience of someone twice his age, I marveled at how much wisdom could fit into a 13-year-old body. The program had become one of our restaurant's most successful initiatives, with a waiting list of young people eager to join, and several program graduates already accepted to colleges, with scholarships they'd earned through the leadership skills and work experience Tyler's program provided. The dinner crowd was winding down when I noticed a familiar figure sitting alone in the corner booth. Amanda sat with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, her usually perfect hair showing signs of stress, and her expensive clothes looking somehow diminished in our warm, unpretentious environment. She'd been coming in sporadically for the past few months, always alone, always quiet, watching our operation with an expression I couldn't quite read. I approached her table cautiously. Our relationship remained complicated, a mixture of old hurts and tentative hopes that neither of us seemed quite ready to address directly. "How's the coffee tonight?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "Perfect, as always," Amanda replied, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Tyler's really grown up." I followed her gaze to where my son was explaining to the teenage volunteers how to calculate the most efficient way to serve a six-top table. He has. This place has been good for him. "This place has been good for everyone, from what I can see," Amanda said quietly. "I've been watching, Jessica. The way people respond to you both. The community you've built here. It's impressive." I waited, sensing there was more she needed to say. "Emma and Sophie ask about Tyler sometimes," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want to know why they don't see their cousin anymore, why we don't all have dinner together like we used to. What do you tell them?" Amanda's hands tightened around her coffee mug. "I tell them that families sometimes have disagreements, and that grown-ups need time to work things out." "Is that what you think happened? A disagreement?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching Tyler laugh with his volunteers as they cleaned tables and restocked supplies. "No," she said finally. "I think what happened was that we forgot what family is supposed to mean. We got so caught up in appearances and status that we lost sight of what actually matters. Which is love, acceptance, making sure the people we care about know they're valued for who they are, not what they have or what they can do for us." I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of a casual dismissal that had characterized her attitude toward Tyler and me for so many years. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before: genuine remorse. "Amanda, what happened? Why are you here, really?" She set down her coffee mug and reached into her purse, pulling out a folded piece of paper. "Emma wrote this for a school assignment about heroes. She was supposed to write about someone who inspired her." I unfolded the paper and began to read Emma's careful handwriting. "My hero is my cousin, Tyler Martinez. I don't see him very much because of grown-up problems, but I remember him from when I was little. Tyler always shared his toys, even when we didn't share ours with him. He made us pictures and gave us presents he made himself, and he never got mad when we said his things weren't as good as store-bought ones. Tyler was always kind, even when we weren't kind back. I heard my mom and dad talking about how Tyler and Aunt Jessica have a restaurant now where they help people feel welcome. I wish I could go there and tell Tyler I'm sorry for not being a better cousin. I think Tyler is a hero because he knows how to make people feel good about themselves, even when other people make him feel bad. I want to learn how to be like that." I felt tears spring to my eyes as I finished reading. "Emma wrote this?" She did. And when she read it aloud to her class, her teacher asked if she'd like to interview Tyler for the school newspaper. Emma got so excited about the idea that she begged me to arrange it. I folded the paper carefully and handed it back to Amanda. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I'd ask you." But Jessica, reading that essay, seeing how clearly Emma understood what we'd done wrong, it broke something open in me. My 9-year-old daughter has more wisdom about family than I do. Emma sounds like a thoughtful kid. She is. They both are. But they're growing up in a bubble, Jessica. They're surrounded by people who have money and privilege, and they're starting to think that's normal for everyone. They don't understand that some people struggle, that some families work multiple jobs just to pay rent, that some kids don't have college funds and vacation homes and private tutors. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Amanda looked surprised by the question. Isn't it? Don't you think children should understand how the world really works? I think children should understand that they're fortunate, and that with fortune comes responsibility to help others. But I don't think they need to feel guilty about their advantages. Then what should I do? How do I teach them about fairness and kindness without making them feel bad about what they have? I glanced over at Tyler, who was now sitting with his volunteers around one of our larger tables, leading what looked like a debriefing session about the evening service. He was asking each teenager to share one thing they'd learned and one thing they wanted to improve, listening to their responses with the focused attention that made people feel heard and valued. You let them learn from Tyler, I said simply. Amanda followed my gaze. You'd be willing to do that after everything? I'd be willing to try it. But Amanda, this isn't about you proving that you've changed, or me forgiving you for what happened. This is about giving 3 kids the chance to know each other as they really are, not as the people their families expected them to be. What would that look like? I considered this carefully. Emma could come do that interview. Maybe Sophie too, if she's interested. They could spend an afternoon here, see how the restaurant works, meet some of the other kids in Tyler's program. No pressure, no forced bonding, just the opportunity to discover whether they actually like each other when they're not performing for adults. And if they do like each other, then maybe they could be part of each other's lives. Maybe Emma and Sophie could participate in some of our community events. See what it looks like when kids from different backgrounds work together on projects they care about. Amanda nodded slowly. I think Emma would love that. Sophie might need more time, but Emma has been asking to volunteer somewhere. She says she wants to do something that matters. Tyler would be a good teacher for her. He has a gift for helping people discover what they're good at. Jessica, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Do you think it's too late? For us, I mean, for our family. I looked around our restaurant, taking in the art wall where local students' work hung beside pieces by established artists, the reading corner where Mr. Peterson was helping a group of elementary school kids with their homework, the community bulletin board covered with job postings and babysitting offers and invitations to neighborhood events. I think family isn't just about blood, I said finally. I think it's about showing up for each other, about creating space for people to be themselves, about building something together that's bigger than any individual ego or agenda. So if you're asking whether you can undo the damage that was done, the answer is probably no. Tyler will always remember being excluded from Christmas dinner. He'll always know what it feels like to be judged for things beyond his control. Emma and Sophie will always have grown up with advantages that Tyler didn't have. Amanda's face fell. But, I continued, if you're asking whether it's possible to build something new, something better than what we had before, then yes, I think it is. Tyler has taught me that the best response to exclusion is inclusion, that the best answer to judgment is acceptance, that the best way to heal from rejection is to create belonging for others. I want to try, Amanda said quietly. I want Emma and Sophie to know their cousin. I want them to learn what Tyler knows about kindness and community. And I want to understand what you've built here, because it's something I never learned how to build. It starts with showing up, I said. Not with grand gestures or expensive gifts or perfect apologies, but with consistent presence. With paying attention to what matters to the people you love. With being willing to be uncomfortable while you learn new ways of being in relationship. Can you teach me? I smiled, remembering all the times Tyler had asked me similar questions when he was younger and struggling to understand social dynamics or school politics. I can't teach you, but Tyler can. He's become an expert at creating inclusive communities. As if summoned by our conversation, Tyler appeared at our table, carrying a plate of his latest creation, apple cinnamon bread, that he'd been perfecting for our weekend breakfast menu. Aunt Amanda, he said, his voice carefully neutral, but not unfriendly. Would you like to try something new? I'd been working on this recipe for weeks. Amanda looked at the offered plate, then up at Tyler's earnest face. "I'd love to try it." She took a bite, and her expression shifted to genuine surprise. "Tyler, this is incredible. You made this yourself?" "I've been learning to bake from Mrs. Patterson," Tyler said, referring to one of our regular customers who had offered to teach him traditional recipes in exchange for help with her grocery shopping. "She says baking is like chemistry, but with better results." "It's restaurant quality," Amanda said, and there was no condescension in her voice, just honest amazement. "Thanks. Mom says I might be able to add some of my baked goods to our regular menu if I keep improving." "Tyler," Amanda said carefully, "Emma has been asking about you. She wrote a school essay about you, actually." Tyler's eyebrows rose. "About me? Why?" "She wrote about heroes. And she chose you. She talked about how kind you've always been, even when—" Amanda's voice faltered. "Even when you guys weren't very kind back." Tyler finished matter-of-factly. "Yeah, I remember that. She wants to interview you for her school newspaper. Would you be open to that?" Tyler glanced at me, and I gave him a small nod indicating that this was his decision to make. "What kind of interview?" he asked. "About your restaurant, about your youth program, about how you learn to build community. Her teacher thinks other kids would be inspired by your story." Tyler considered this for a moment. Would Emma really be interested in learning about this stuff, or is she just doing it because a teacher assigned it? Amanda's face flushed slightly. "I think she's genuinely interested. She's been asking a lot of questions lately about why some families have more than others, about how she can use her advantages to help people instead of just enjoying them." "Those are good questions," Tyler said approvingly. "She can come do the interview if she wants. Maybe she could shadow me for a few hours, see how everything works here. But I won't pretend to be someone I'm not just to make her article sound better." "I wouldn't want you to," Amanda said quickly. "Emma needs to see the real world, not the sanitized version of it that Mark and I have been showing her." Tyler nodded. "Okay then, she can come next Saturday afternoon. That's when we do our weekly community planning meeting with the youth volunteers. If she really wants to understand what we do here, that's the best place to start." After Amanda left, promising to bring Emma by the following weekend, Tyler helped me finish the evening cleanup while we talked about the unexpected turn our family dynamics were taking. "Are you okay with Emma coming here?" I asked as we restocked the coffee station. "I think so," Tyler said thoughtfully. "I mean, I'm not going to pretend that Christmas didn't happen, or that I don't remember how they used to treat us. But people can change, right? You and Grandma proved that. What if Emma hasn't changed? What if she's still the same kid who made fun of your clothes and your gifts?" Tyler shrugged. "Then she'll learn something from being here, or she won't. But either way, I'll know I gave her the chance. You're very wise for 13. "I learned from the best," Tyler said with a grin. "Besides, if Emma is really interested in learning about community building and social justice, she's going to love meeting some of the other kids in our program." Maria's story about immigrating from Guatemala is incredible. And Jake's working on a project to create after-school tutoring for kids whose parents work evening shifts. If Emma wants to understand how to use privilege responsibly, she couldn't ask for better teachers. The following Saturday, Emma arrived at our restaurant wearing jeans and sneakers instead of the designer dresses I remembered from family gatherings. She looked nervous but determined, carrying a notebook and a list of carefully prepared questions. "Hi, Tyler," she said, her voice smaller than I remembered. "Thank you for letting me come." "Thanks for being interested," Tyler replied easily. "Are you ready to jump in, or do you want to observe for a while first?" "Jump in, I think. I learn better when I'm doing things, instead of just watching." Tyler grinned. "Perfect. We're making care packages for elderly neighbors today. Mrs. Patterson coordinated with the senior center to identify people who might appreciate some homemade treats and friendly notes." For the next 3 hours, I watched Emma work alongside Tyler's youth volunteers, listening to their stories and asking thoughtful questions about their experiences and perspectives. She helped Maria practice her English by reading aloud from donated books that would go into the care packages. She worked with Jake to design cheerful cards with encouraging messages. She asked Tyler detailed questions about how he'd developed the leadership program and what he'd learned about managing group dynamics. "The hardest part isn't the logistics," Tyler explained as they packed the final care packages. "It's helping people understand that they have value and skills to contribute, even if those skills are different from what society usually rewards." "What do you mean?" Emma asked. "Like Maria," Tyler said, nodding toward the teenager who is teaching two younger kids how to write their names in Spanish. "She speaks 3 languages fluently and has incredible organizational skills. But because her family doesn't have money for college prep courses and standardized test tutoring, some people assume she's not academically gifted." "That's not fair," Emma said with genuine indignation. "No, it's not. But instead of just being angry about unfairness, we try to create opportunities for people to show what they can do. That's why our program focuses on real projects that benefit the community. Everyone succeeds, and everyone learns." Emma filled several pages of her notebook with quotes and observations, but more importantly, she seemed to be absorbing lessons about empathy and equity that no classroom lecture could have provided. As the afternoon wound down, Emma approached me while Tyler was saying goodbye to his volunteers. "Aunt Jessica," she said formally, "I owe you and Tyler an apology." "For what, specifically?" "For not seeing how special Tyler was when we were younger. For not understanding that the differences between our families weren't his fault. For letting my parents' attitudes influence how I treated him." "Emma, you are a child. Children learn from the adults around them. You're not responsible for beliefs you inherited." "But I am responsible for what I do now that I understand better," she said with startling maturity. "I want to be part of what Tyler's building here. Not because I feel guilty about having more money, but because this work matters and I want to contribute to it." "What would that look like?" "Tyler said your program could use help with social media and website design. I'm good at that stuff. And I could help spread the word about your community events. Plus, my school has a community service requirement, and I'd rather do something real than just show up places to get my hours signed off." "What do your parents think about that?" Emma's expression grew more serious. "Mom supports it. Dad is adjusting to some new realities about our family and our values. He's not ready to apologize yet, but he's starting to ask different questions." "And Sophie?" "Sophie's interested, but she's nervous about whether she'll fit in. She's worried that she won't be smart enough or tough enough to keep up with kids who've had to overcome real challenges." I smiled, recognizing in Sophie the same insecurity that Tyler had struggled with when he was younger. "Tell Sophie that intelligence comes in many forms, and that some of the most important qualities for this work are curiosity and compassion. If she has those, she'll fit in just fine." Emma nodded eagerly. "I'll tell her. And Aunt Jessica? Thank you for letting me be here today. Tyler is an amazing cousin, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." 6 months later, both Emma and Sophie had become regular volunteers at Martina's Family Kitchen, with Emma managing our social media presence and Sophie helping coordinate our monthly book drives for underfunded school libraries. They'd brought several of their private school classmates to volunteer as well, creating exactly the kind of cross-community connections that Tyler had envisioned from the beginning. The changes in my nieces were remarkable. Emma had developed a sophisticated understanding of social justice issues and was planning to study nonprofit management in college. Sophie had discovered a talent for working with younger children and was considering a career in education. Most importantly, both girls had learned to see Tyler not as the poor cousin they needed to tolerate, but as a leader and teacher whose insights helped them understand their own responsibilities as privileged young people. The transformation in Amanda was equally striking. She'd begun volunteering regularly at our restaurant, using her marketing background to help us develop partnerships with local schools and community organizations. She'd also started having difficult conversations with Mark about their family's values and their children's education, about inequality and social responsibility. "I never realized how narrow our world was," she told me one evening as we prepared for a community fundraiser. "Emma and Sophie were growing up thinking that everyone lived like we do, that success was just a matter of working hard and making good choices. They didn't understand that some people work twice as hard as we do, and still struggle to pay rent because they weren't born with the same advantages. And now they do understand? Now they understand that their advantages come with responsibilities. They're learning to use their privilege as a tool for creating opportunities for others, rather than just as a way to separate themselves from people who have less. My father remained the most resistant to change. He still struggled with admitting that he'd been wrong about Tyler and me, still found ways to justify his past behavior by talking about, quote, different parenting philosophies and, quote, generational misunderstandings. But even he had begun showing up to our community events, quietly observing the work we were doing and occasionally offering grudging praise for Tyler's accomplishments. The boy has a good head for business, he admitted to me after watching Tyler facilitate a youth entrepreneurship workshop. He understands customer service and community relations better than some college graduates I've worked with. It wasn't the enthusiastic grandfather's pride that Tyler deserved, but it was acknowledgement, and Tyler seemed content with that progress. Grandpa's learning, Tyler said philosophically when I asked how he felt about my father's gradual attitude shift. It's harder for adults to change than it is for kids, because they have more years of thinking the same way. But he's trying, and that's what matters. 2 years after that devastating Christmas Eve, we hosted our own Christmas celebration at Martinez Family Kitchen. The restaurant was closed to the public for the evening, filled instead with our chosen family. The neighbors who had become our closest friends, the teenagers whose lives had been shaped by Tyler's mentorship, the elderly customers who had become surrogate grandparents, the community members who had found belonging at our tables. Tyler, now 14 and tall enough to look me in the eye, served as the evening's host, moving gracefully between groups of guests and ensuring that everyone felt included in conversations and activities. Emma and Sophie helped coordinate a gift exchange where everyone received something handmade by another community member. Linda, my mother, had organized a potluck dinner featuring dishes that represented the diverse backgrounds of our extended chosen family. Even Amanda and Mark attended, bringing desserts they'd made themselves and spending the evening listening to stories from program participants about how Tyler's leadership had influenced their educational and career aspirations. This is what Christmas is supposed to feel like, Emma told me as she helped clear dishes from the main dining room. Like everyone matters, like everyone belongs, like the whole point is being together and taking care of each other. That's exactly what it's supposed to feel like, I agreed. As the evening wound down and guests began to head home, Tyler found me in the kitchen, where I was washing the last of the serving dishes. Mom, he said, can I tell you something? Always. I'm glad they didn't make room for me at that Christmas dinner 3 years ago. I turned to look at him, surprised. Really? Quote, really, because if they had made room for me, I would have spent my whole life trying to fit into their idea of what family should be. I would have learned to be smaller, quieter, less curious about the world. I would have thought that belonging meant conforming to other people's expectations. And instead, I learned that belonging means creating space for other people to be themselves. I learned that the best families aren't the ones you're born into, but the ones you build together. I learned that exclusion can be a gift if it teaches you to practice inclusion. Tyler gestured toward the dining room, where the last few guests were saying their goodbyes, their faces glowing with the satisfaction that comes from genuine community connection. Look what we built, Mom. Look at all the people who feel valued here, all the kids who are learning to be leaders, all the neighbors who have found friendship and support. None of this would have existed if we'd stayed at their table. I pulled my son into a hug, marveling at the wisdom and compassion he'd developed through his experiences of both rejection and acceptance. You're right, I said. This is so much better than what we lost. It's not better than what we lost, Tyler corrected gently. It's better than what we never really had in the first place. As we turned off the lights and locked up the restaurant, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pain of that Christmas Eve rejection had been real and devastating, but it had also been transformative. It had forced us to examine our own values, to build authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation, to create something meaningful from the ashes of disappointment. Tyler had grown into exactly the kind of person I'd hoped he would become: kind but not naive, generous but not self-sacrificing, confident but not arrogant. He understood that true strength came from lifting others up, that real success meant creating opportunities for everyone to thrive. More importantly, he'd learned that his worth wasn't determined by other people's recognition of it. He'd discovered that the best response to rejection was to create inclusion, that the best answer to judgment was to practice acceptance, that the best way to heal from exclusion was to ensure that no one else experienced the same pain. Walking home through our neighborhood on that snowy December night, passing houses lit with Christmas decorations and filled with families celebrating the holiday in their own ways, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the path we'd traveled. We'd been told there was no room for us at their table, but we'd built our own table, one with unlimited seating and unconditional welcome. We'd created a place where every person mattered, where every story was valued, where every dream was supported. That Christmas Eve 3 years ago, my family had tried to teach Tyler that he wasn't good enough for their love. Instead, they'd taught him that their love wasn't good enough for him. And in learning that lesson, he'd become someone capable of offering the kind of love that actually was good enough. Patient, inclusive, transformative love that saw potential where others saw problems, that created belonging where others created barriers. Tyler had taken the worst thing that ever happened to him and turned it into the best thing he could offer the world. That was the real Christmas miracle, not the perfect family we'd lost, but the beautiful community we'd found. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.